Hi everyone, I wanted to make a quick video to introduce week 9 to kind of wrap up some of the weeks that we've been having with our poetry unit and to talk a little bit about what we're going to see the rest of the semester. It's actually not too far to the end right now. For the most part, I think everybody's been doing a really good job keeping up with the work. The discussion boards, I think, have been amazing. I think they've really helped to advance the knowledge of the whole class in a way that traditional classrooms don't even necessarily get at. So I think those have been amazing, and I think the class is going really well. Admittedly, there were some problems with meter. I think I got a lot of emails from people that didn't like the meter assignment, weren't sure how to do meter. I did go through all those journals and give people feedback on their meter and give you some ideas of how you could scan meter a little bit better. It's hard, right? That's not something that's really easy to pick up in a week or so. It's something that takes extended time. But if you're just aware of the concept of meter, aware that it exists, aware that poets manipulate meter in some ways, I think that's half the game, right? And if you study poetry further and become really interested in meter, I think that's something that you might want to develop is scansion. And I think that a lot of critics are really look towards meter in a lot of ways, and a lot of poets really use meter and form. But that's neither here nor there. It's not like a huge part of the assignment, but that's okay. I do think everybody did a really nice job with form, especially sonnet. It seems like people really understood sonnet and were attracted to the sonnet as a form and understanding what it does. And we looked at a few modern sonnets, like the Facebook sonnet, and I think people like those. I think a lot of people could relate to them. So it's an interesting form, and that's definitely one that you should know when you're studying poetry, because so many poems are sonnets. So I look forward to reading those journals that you did on the sonnet too. Also this last week we had a really good discussion on Prufrock, right? When I put that up there I wasn't sure how it would go over, right? But a lot of people really seem to understand the poem as a poem about a guy who's confused with his modern life, and also nervous and maybe self-critical and not sure how to approach a certain situation. A lot of people really grabbed that and had some great insights in terms of some of the allusions in there. So I'm really glad that I put that poem on there. T.S. Eliot's one of my favorite poets. He's when I was in my MFA program, I studied modern poetry, and I did my project on T.S. Eliot and his individual talent, which was an essay that he wrote in the relationship between the modern poets and the romantic poets, which is a really interesting one. The modern poets were really much more about the mind, so there's a really drastic shift, in the late 1800s into the early 1900s. In the late 1800s, romantic poets such as Keats, Shelley, Byron, Wordsworth, Coleridge were all writing. I wish we had a chance to read all of them because they're amazing. So far we've only read maybe that one poem by Wordsworth, but you definitely want to get to Keats and Shelley and Coleridge, especially. His Rime of the Ancient Mariner is an amazing romantic poem. Shelley's Ode to a Skylark is probably the best romantic poem that there is. So it's interesting to study them. But the romantic poets were all about sort of feeling, sentiment, emotion, using poetry to try to capture the feelings, how they felt about the world, how they felt about nature. Nature was really an important part of their writing process. Modern poetry, on the other hand, like what T.S. Eliot does in Prufrock, is a lot more cerebral. It's a lot more about the mind and the movement of the mind, and understanding sort of pressures of society and anxiety in cognitive kinds of ways. And so I think that's where one of the real sort of shifts in romantic and modern poetry is. And I think it's worth talking about because we've really gotten to this point. We've read The Solitary Reaper, we've read the Prufrock. So I just wanted to, as an illustration, read one poem to you real quick. It's not on our reading list, but it's definitely worth listening to and noting. And then we'll pick it up after that and talk a little bit more about what we're going to see this week. So this poem right here is by Wallace Stevens, who's a famous modern poet, a later modern poet. But I think this poem really illustrates the distinction between romantic poetry and modern poetry. Right? We read The Solitary Reaper by Wordsworth, which is about listening to a woman singing a song in a field, and it's about appreciating that song, wondering how that song touches the poet and how he's going to appreciate that song from then on. This poem, The Idea of Order at Key West, is also about listening to someone singing a song, but you'll notice that the poet treats it in a totally different way. The poet's not wondering, how does this make me feel, but why is it making me feel? He's trying to think through the ideas of what it is about the song exactly that makes him feel a certain way. And so that's a real distinction. Solitary Reaper to Idea of Order of Key West is a good distinction between those two movements in poetry. So here's the poem. It's called Idea of Order at Key West by Wallace Stevens, one of my favorite poets, but I didn't dare put many Wallace Stevens poems on because some of them are very cryptic, like The Emperor of Ice Cream. But here's one, The Idea of Order at Key West, worth reading. She sang beyond the genius of the sea. The water never formed to mind or voice, like a body, holy body, fluttering its empty sleeves, and yet its mimic motion made constant cry, caused constantly a cry that was not ours, although we understood, inhuman of the veritable ocean. The sea was not a mask, no more was she. The song and water were not Malay's sound, even if what she sang was what she heard, since what she sang was uttered word by word. It may be that in all her phrases stirred the grinding water and the gasping wind, but it was she, and not the sea, we heard. For she was the maker of the song she sang. The ever-hooded, tragic-gestured sea was merely a place by which she walked to sing. Whose spirit is this? We said, because we knew it was the spirit that we sought, and knew that we should ask this often as she sang. If it was only the dark voice of the sea that rose, or even colored by many waves, if it was only the outer voice of sky and cloud, of sunken coral water-walled, however clear, it would have been deep air, the heaving speech of air, a summer sound repeated in summer without end, and sound alone. But it was more than that, more even than her voice and ours among the meaningless plumbings of water and the wind, theatrical distances, bronze shadows heaped on high horizons, mountainous atmospheres of sky and sea. It was her voice that made the sky acutest at its vanishing. She measured to the hour its solitude. She was the single artificer of the world in which she sang, and when she sang, the sea, whatever self it had, became the self. That was her song, for she was the maker. Then we, as we beheld her striding there alone, knew that there never was a world for her except the one she sang and singing made. Ramon Fernandez, tell me, if you know, why, when the singing ended and we turned toward the town, tell why the glassy lights and the lights in the fishing boats at anchor there, as night descended tilting in the air, mastered the night and portioned out the sea, fixing emblazoned zones and fiery poles, arranging, deepening, enchanting night. O blessed rage for order, pale Ramon, the maker's rage to order words of the sea, words of the fragrant portals, dimly starred, and of ourselves and of our origins, and ghostlier demarcations, keener sounds. Amazing poem. Definitely worth reading. It's fantastic. I think the core of it is really in here. She was the single artificer of the world in which she sang, and when she sang, the sea, whatever self it had, became the self that was her song, for she was the maker. Those are amazing lines about how somebody makes art and what it is about making art. And even at the end here, the maker's rage to order words of the sea. She has a rage to order the words of the sea, to put the language, the nature into language. The other part I really like about this poem is Ramon Fernandez, who comes out of nowhere. Ramon Fernandez, tell me if you know why, when the singing ended and we turned toward the town, tell why the glassy lights, the lights of the fishing boats at anchor there, as night descended tilting in the air, mastered the night and portioned out the sea. Really good poem. But here again, I think you can really see the distinction. This is a good example of a modern poem. This poet is really concerned with the mind of the poem. With thinking through, right, the art. But anyways, so it's just something to note because I think we're there. We're right in between Solitary Reaper and Prufrock, and we're sort of trying to identify the distinctions between romantic and modern, and there's a good place to note it. But that's just sort of for your own amusement. I would like to teach a romantic modern poetry class. I think that would be really interesting. But anyways, let me move on because I'm sort of droning on here. So this week, what you're going to see is we're moving on to Essay 2. Right? So we've had a really good run with poetry so far. Now this is kind of the accumulation of our poetry unit. Essay 2 is going to be a literary comparison essay. And basically what you're going to do is read chapter 35. It's thematic case study, Love and Longing, pages 953 through 963. You're going to pick 2 poems out of that unit that are going to be the basis for your comparison essay. And basically what you're going to do is come up with an original thesis about the relationship of the 2 poems. And I talk a lot about that in the video under instructional materials. You know, when you're creating a thesis, you want to think of a surprising similarity in works that appear different, or a surprising difference in works that appear similar. And then in your essay, you're just going to show us how are these essays similar, how are these essays different, and you're probably going to move through point by point, thinking of, you know, like maybe they're different in terms of meter, maybe they're similar in terms of metaphor, similar in terms of imagery. It's really up to you, but you're going to take the tools that we've been working on over the last couple of weeks and put them to use in this comparative essay. So definitely take a look at the sample comparative essay I put under instructional materials. Definitely take a look at the assignment sheet that I put under assignments, and then take a look at the video that I put under instructional material. And then once you feel like you have an idea, we have one discussion forum this week like we did with essay 1, so post some of your observations and ideas that you want to develop in the essay on that discussion forum to get some feedback by Thursday, and then post the essay under essay 2 upload link by Sunday. So that's what we're doing this week, and let me know if you have any questions, but mostly we're going to be working on this essay, and we have one discussion forum post. Next week, we're not going to move on from poetry, but we're going to have a really fun week, I think. I'm going to have all of you write a poem. So you're going to write a poem that's an ekphrastic poem. We're going to talk about ekphrastic poetry, which is poetry that captures visual art. I'm going to have you write an ekphrastic poem next week. So I think that'll be a lot of fun. And then in week 11, we're going to move on to drama, and we're going to talk about some of the elements of drama and read some short drama. And we're going to talk about critical lenses like feminism and Marxism. Week 12, we're going to read a full-length play. So get ready for week 12. Currently, I have The Importance of Being Earnest up there, but I think I'm going to change it. I'll let you know. And then in week 13, we're going to watch an adaptation of that play to some other form of media, such as film. And then you're going to write your third essay, which is about comparing the full-length play to the adaptation. And then we have spring break. And then we have our last week after spring break. So only a couple weeks left. We're getting there. So that's it for the introduction video for now. So work on the essay. Let me know if you have any questions. You know, make sure you post your discussion forum ideas by Thursday. You know, otherwise, you know, good luck, and I look forward to seeing all your essays soon.